This past Saturday, I watched a couple of football games, and one of the ones I watched was kind of late Saturday evening. It was from my alma mater. I went to Brigham Young University, and they were playing another great Christian university, Baylor University, out of Waco, Texas. And the game was in Provo, Utah, the home of Brigham Young University. And it was just a crazy evening. The crowd was great. It was a perfect night. And just a sea of royal blue. It was awesome. Wish I could have been there. It was great to watch. And it was a game that just went back and forth. Neither team could really get things moving. Both defenses were just terrific. And you kind of felt bad for the offensive players because it was such a tough night. Um, but it ended up being a tie game. And BYU was marching the ball down the field I want to say they had a minute and a half, maybe a little bit longer than that. But anyhow, they got within field goal range. They got like down to the 22 or 23-yard line, and they brought on their field goal kicker who had kicked two field goals earlier. And this was just a chip shot. This young field goal kicker has kicked several field goals beyond 50 yards. He never misses. Well, he did. He did. And so the game goes into overtime. Baylor gets the ball first, and Baylor, they didn't want to be down next to the BYU student section because they were so loud. There were great problems for Baylor team, so they chose the opposite end of the field, down where the Baylor fans were, and just the rank and file fan. And they're loud, but nothing like the students. Us older people have some inhibitions, even at games. So anyhow, Baylor was not able to score a touchdown, so they were going to go for a field goal, at least put some points on the board. And their kicker, he'd missed a field goal a little earlier, and actually had an extra point that bounced off the upright. But over time, he's been a really good kicker. Well, he missed. And it wasn't that close. So, for the Baylor people, I'm sure they were upset. But in watching his teammates, they tapped him on the helmet and put their arm around him. It's like, we've got your back, you're okay. So BYU comes out, and they're trying to knock it in, but really not that worried about scoring a touchdown. All they need is a field goal to win. So they literally threw the ball away a couple times. And then the last time he missed a field goal, the ball was in the left hash mark, where typically he likes to kick from, but he kind of hooked it to the left. So this time they set it up midfield. It's dead center in the field. And again, he's only like the 22 or 23-yard line, another easy kick for him. And he hooks it worse. He missed again. So this is two times he's missed. And this kid never misses. So the poor Baylor kicker, after BYU had the chance to win it in regulation, then it goes to overtime, and the Baylor kicker has a chance to put his team ahead, and he misses. Now the BYU kicker misses. This is three field goals in a row that are missed by these two young men. And after each one was missed, their team gathered around them, tapped him on the head, arm around the shoulder. Even on the sideline, you didn't see people going nuts at all. They had confidence that the rest of the team could do their job. So now going into the second overtime, it's BYU's chance. And they throw the ball this time, and anyhow, they get the ball into the end zone for a touchdown. So now Baylor obviously has to score a touchdown. But in the second overtime, you can go for 2 points. And BYU's 2-point effort didn't win, or didn't work. So now Baylor, if they just score a touchdown, they're going to have to go for 2. But I mean, they can win it on 2 because BYU hasn't scored. This might be too much detail, but I'm giving it to you anyhow. So the Baylor team comes up, and now they're right next to that student section. And that student section created all kinds of problems for Baylor. and they kept having false starts. They kept going backwards rather than forward. And finally, in the end, on a fourth down, Baylor threw a pass and it went through the end zone, and BYU wins the game. And the camera is panning. As soon as that's over, the camera is panning at the BYU quarterback who's got his arm around. He's on his knee, one knee, and his arm is around the kicker who missed 2 field goal attempts. And as soon as that pass was missed, you see the two of them stand up and embrace. And the camera's close enough, you can just see the kicker's just crying. Right? Both teams took care of these young men who did not have their best nights. Both teams rallied around that person. You can really tell that these teams love each other and the great sportsmanship. It was a great game. Both teams deserved to win. Both teams deserved to lose. But one team eventually won. And as a fan of Brigham Young, I was happy it was them. But so much respect for the coaching staff and the players of both teams, that they know how to be disciples of Jesus Christ. They know how to be friends and great teammates. Many years ago, when I was a student at Brigham Young University, I worked at the barbershop right on campus, and I had the chance to be the barber for an awful lot of the students and many of the athletes. And one of my customers happened to be the kicker on the football team. And this is back in the days, this is pre-Jim McMahon. We had a quarterback by the name of Mark Wilson. He was an All-American. And our kicker, Brent Johnson, was just a tremendous athlete, not just as a kicker. I mean, he was a great athlete. He did not want to play golf against Brent. But Brent was a great kicker. He was an All-American. And they were in a bowl game, and it came down, all the way down to the very end of the game, and they were down by a point. All they needed was a field goal to win. They got down to the 11-yard line, and Brent had already kicked 4 field goals, all of them in excess of 40 yards. And one of them was, I want to say, 47 or 48 yards. So Brent had a good night, and not a problem. 11-yard line, piece of cake. Brent missed that field goal. He hooked it, and he hooked it terribly. And the team put their arms around Brent and walked him off the field and lost the game. And you didn't see any discouragement. And you saw the team just embracing Brent and knowing that if anybody felt bad, nobody could feel worse than Brent. Well, years ago in bowl games, when there wasn't so much money involved, you would have sponsors. You would have a main sponsor of an event, but then you would have other sponsors, other corporate sponsors that would come in, and they would literally sponsor individuals where they would provide money for the bowl game and stuff, but there was 1 or 2 players on the team, but they were almost like a mentor. They would talk to them and talk about different things. The world of football was a little different back then. And Brent Johnson's mentor was a gentleman who was a senior level executive with PepsiCo. And he had been very impressed with Brent and the entire BYU program through that week of festivities when they were doing things with the opposing team. And he said, "Oh, I can sure see a difference between the maturity of your team and this other team." And he had mentioned that several times to Brent. And Brent said, "Well, you know, a lot of us have been on missions and we're a little bit older. Some of us are older, but some of us have families, so we just probably look at things a little different." And that's probably the biggest reason why. Well, that evening, as the teams were shaking hands and doing things on the field and the trophies being presented, this gentleman from PepsiCo somehow got into the locker room and put a card uh, at Brent's locker. I'm not sure if he was there, he had somebody go do this and put it in Brent's locker. But when Brent got to his locker, he found this card from this gentleman from PepsiCo. And he had told Brent all week long he could see the difference in the teams. And on that card, it said, Brent, you showed me why there is such a difference. The way your team embraced you after tonight. Now, I know this story, not just because Brent was one of my customers, but Brent became a good friend. And he came and he spoke for a group of young people at the church that I attend. And he told this story. And Mark Wilson, that quarterback, was one of my customers as well. And Mark Wilson told me that as tough as that was to lose that game, he said he and Brent, who were best of friends, he said we probably learned more from that missed field goal than we learned from the entire season. And that was that we were brothers. And that's what mattered the most. Well, Saturday night in Provo, when Baylor and BYU faced off, and they had this back and forth of, you got to be kidding. And their kickers did not have their best nights. Both teams, again, demonstrated what makes them different from other teams. And that is their love of their brothers and that they're disciples of Jesus Christ. I want you to think about that tonight as you watch athletics, as you watch people in our political spectrum, as you watch people in everyday life. Those people who cherish other people, who see the good in people, and when people fail at something or have a bad day, they put their arm around them, they support them, make sure they know that you notice. We live in a world that seems to only notice greed and whatever's best for me. The world that the Lord wants us to live in is a world that is completely about serving others. Just as he served us, he set the great example. It was never about him, always about his Father and about us. I hope when we return to him, he can say the same thing. It was always about my Father and me, and never about you. Just wanted you to think about that this evening as I'm recording this. And I'll have a blessed day.